Have you ever played a game that was just so good, you became a fan of it right off the bat? I have. And one of those games is Super Metroid. Released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo, this is easily my pick as the best game on the Super Nintendo, and one of the greatest games of all time. But why is it so good? Why is it so amazing, and why is it hailed to be this masterpiece among fans to this very day? Well, let's find out. Just like in the previous two games, Super Metroid establishes its atmosphere right at the title screen. But this time, it's creepier, thanks to the music and the visuals that fit perfectly. I mean, it just looks so eerie and cool. The dead scientists and the Metroid, it burns right into your brain. After starting a new game, you are given a quick backstory as to what happened in the last two games.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
You know, it's pretty cool to hear a voice sound that amazing from a game that's from 1994. I mean, this is still from a time where voices in games was rare, especially when you consider that this game is on a cartridge and not a CD. That right there shows how impressive the Super Nintendo really was and how much of a powerhouse it was when it came out. Now, Super Metroid picks up pretty much where Metroid 2 left off. Samus has the last Metroid in the galaxy after going to their homeworld and killing most of them. Then she goes to this space station and delivers the Metroid to all the scientists there so that they could do research on it to better society. However, once she leaves the space station, it is immediately under attack by Ridley, the leader of the space pirates. So after hearing the distress signal from the station, Samus heads back to it. And that's where the first level begins. Man, the best part, in my opinion, about this first section is the atmosphere. Again, I can't overstate how awesome the atmosphere is in these Metroid games. But when you're on this space station, you feel alone. Just like on the title screen, the music and the visuals complement each other, and it creates this beautiful, eerie feeling. Especially when you go into the room where you see the dead scientists, and you discover that the Metroid has been stolen. As you keep running through the deserted space colony, you'll eventually find the Metroid, and Ridley, and he just totally overpowers you in this fight. It's not even fair, he just owns you the entire time. And eventually he just gets sick of you and flies away. And that's when the station begins its self-destruction. You only have 1 minute to escape, but when you do, you leave the station and you make your way down to planet Zebes, the same planet that you were on in the first game. Keeping with the theme of the atmosphere, the first few minutes when you're on planet Zebes is still creepy. It still has that foreboding tone to it, and that's the beauty of it. This is one of my favorite parts about the Metroid series, is just this feeling of just being doomed. Another great thing is that there are a few homages to the original game here, which I always love when it's done right, and here, it couldn't have been done in a more appropriate way. Now, as far as story goes in Super Metroid, there really isn't a whole lot to say. I mean, this came out at a time where story in games was kind of downplayed, but the story here isn't told through text, but instead actions, and it's kind of whispered to you. And what I mean by whispered is that there's a lot of little details that you can easily miss. Take this part for example. If you look closely while going down this tube, you can spot a Metroid. But it's not just any Metroid. This is actually called a Mocktroid. Now the Mocktroids are the result of a failed cloning experiment by Ridley. See, he was actually trying to clone Metroids to use them as biological weapons. And doesn't that just sound like the Umbrella Corporation from the Resident Evil series? And that's another thing I really love about Super Metroid, is just all the little details hidden throughout the environment. I mean, if you look into the backgrounds, you can often find something that's mysterious. I have had tons of conversations with some of my friends about all the sort of lore that goes on in the Metroid games. If there is one series that has such an underrated universe, in my opinion, it's Metroid. There's no way I can go into any of it right now without talking for an hour, but I highly recommend you going out and finding some of the Metroid lore, because it is amazing and it is well worth your time. You want to know another great thing about this game? The music. I've talked about it in previous videos, and I've mentioned it a few times in this video alone, but it is incredible. Super Metroid has one of the greatest soundtracks in video gaming history. And not just the soundtrack, but all of the sound design in this game is absolutely incredible. It's very atmospheric and ambient, and if you're really into that sort of stuff like me, you should already be listening to this soundtrack. If you haven't heard this soundtrack, then you're doing something wrong with your life, and you should be ashamed of yourself. There are so many great tracks in this game, and all of them feel appropriate in the right places. Man, I've praised this game so much before I've even talked about how good the gameplay is. Playing Super Metroid just feels good. You have complete control of Samus. Movement feels smooth, and nothing is restricted. There's a lot of great new innovations to the game, like a map system, and tons of new tricks that Samus can do, like wall jumping and the Shine Spark abilities. Mastering these techniques is essential to progressing. They can help you reach higher rooms, or if you're even good enough, you can get into areas that you're not even supposed to be in. These moves are tricky at first, but when you get them down, you'll know how to get around really quickly. One really great thing about this game is you're able to play it in so many different ways. You can speedrun the game, you can go for 100%, or you could do a combination of the two, whichever you prefer. This is still one of the most popular games to speedrun, whether it be at conventions, competitions, or just online. You can go out and find tons and tons of Super Metroid speedruns. The amount of time that you spend in the game actually affects the ending, so if you want the best ending, you have to beat the game in less than 3 hours. The quickest time that I've ever gotten through this game was 2 hours and 15 minutes. I still try to shave off minutes from that, but I think that's as good as it's gonna get for me. Not only can you play this game in so many different ways, but there's tons of situations that you can approach differently. Take the boss Dragon, for example. As soon as he appears, most people would start unloading missiles into his stomach. But there's a different way to kill him that saves you time and missiles. As soon as you enter his room, you need to destroy the turrets on the sides. Then let him catch you and grab hold of you. Make sure you have the grappling beam equipped, and when you start to struggle and move back and forth, shoot the broken turrets. Samus will act as a conductor, and the electricity will pass through her and into Dragon, and it will kill him in seconds. Just make sure you have enough health to do this, because this can also kill you pretty quickly. And speaking of boss fights, man, there are some really good ones in this game. But I think my favorite has to be the boss fight with Mother Brain. See, it starts off like the original boss fight from the first Metroid. After you take out the glass that she's in, you think it might be over, but no. It gets better. Look at that huge beast. Mother Brain is such a cool villain. I mean, right? Just look at her. She's horrific. It's amazing. Even though this isn't the hardest boss fight in the game, that honor goes to the Ridley boss fights. I really love this boss fight. It's just It's so cool to fight Mother Brain like this. It just feels good when you take out one of these giant beasts. The last thing that I want to talk about is the level design. It is absolutely phenomenal. This is some of the best level design in video game history. The environments are fun and interesting to run around in. All the different areas work together to create something visually stunning. It's all appealing to the eye. You're never confused on where you're at. The excellent use of color here is absolutely amazing. Also, normally I don't mention the graphics because I just don't feel the need to, but I love the graphics in this game. They just look so cool, especially if you look in the backgrounds and the foregrounds. There is just so much attention to detail put into these levels. As far as flaws or complaints go, I don't have many. In fact, I don't have any major issues with the game. I just have a couple little nitpicks. First of all, switching between weapons and items feels clunky, because you have to hit select to cycle through all of them. This wasn't a problem in the first two games, because you only had missiles to switch to. Here, on the other hand, there's missiles, super missiles, power bombs, the grappling beam, and the X-ray scope. It can be a bit of a pain to switch in the heat of combat. Also, I wish save stations replenished your health and missiles. Instead, you have to find various refill stations across the map, which often means you're going to have to go backtracking just to recharge something. But these minor inconveniences can be overlooked because the game is so good. If you're watching this and think this is cool, find a way to play it. It's on the SNES Classic, you can find the original cartridge, or you can also get it from the Switch online subscription service. If you like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, you should play this as well. And Castlevania Symphony of the Night. That's a game we'll have to get to at some other time.